Hi.
Hi. And I think we've got Katie listening in. All right.
Yeah, I'll just be in the background. I'll let you guys lead the show.
Welcome.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So let me hit record and we're going to start this thing. Hold on just a moment. And we are on filmsgonewild.com and Bitch Talk. My name is John Wildman. I'm here with my co-host, Angela Tabora and Erin Lim. We are virtually at Sundance 2021, and we're going to talk about the documentary Rebel Hearts. We have with us today the director, Pedro Kos. Pedro, nice to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are all loving on this film. So why don't you introduce our audience who has not yet had a chance to see the film, what Rebel Hearts is about?
Well, Rebel Hearts is about the extraordinary, kick-ass, Immaculate Heart Sisters, who were an order of Catholic nuns in Hollywood, California, who bravely stood up to the patriarchy of the Catholic Church and the ever-powerful Cardinal McIntyre, standing up for what they believed in, and who took part in movements like the civil rights movements, the anti-Vietnam War movements, and continue to cause waves to today. That is in a nutshell.
Okay, well, we have a Catholic schoolgirl in our midst, and I think Erin and I are going to take a back seat to Angela. Angela, lead us off.
Yeah, Pedro, I can't tell you how much I love this film. I'm a recovering Catholic schoolgirl, and I grew up in LA, and IMAC was our rival high school. So it really just touched on a lot of things from my past. Like, I see a nun today, and I have a visceral reaction. Like, I lower my head and I soften my voice. It's just something I live with. But I love that you talk about the history of why they became nuns in the first place, especially growing up in the 50s and the 60s. These were just independent women who didn't necessarily want to get married and have kids, and they saw a chance to get an education. And I really, for someone like me who has seen nuns one way my whole life, I was actually thinking like, hot damn, if I was born in the 50s, maybe I would have become a nun, and I'm just curious to see how this film has changed some preconceived notions that you may have had about the nunnery or organized religion in general.
Absolutely. Angela, so there with you in terms of to put it very mildly, my very ambivalent relationship with the institutional Catholic Church. Growing up as a gay man in Catholic Brazil, that was always a very fractious and tricky relationship. And one of the things is that they blew open my imagination of sort of the antithesis of what you think of what my mom's Catholic school, what my Catholic school upbringing was. And it was really one of opportunity and possibility of reaching out and being part of the world, of empowering not only their sisters, but their students to be all they could be leaders. And this was the most refreshing thing, is that this was a time when women were afforded a lot, even less opportunities. They were very growing up in the 40s and the 50s, all the way through, the second wave of feminism in the late 60s and 70s. There were not very many options. And as one of the former students said, this was a time when it was rare for women to get a college degree in the way that in the way that we take, that we see now. But one of the things that was really extraordinary was to see this incredible community come and empower each other. And they, the Immaculate Heart Sisters, would send their fellow sisters to get PhDs. They had more PhDs than all of the priests in Los Angeles. They were getting PhDs from Stanford, from Columbia, from USC, from the best educational institutions, so they could come back and be the best teachers and professors, to empower their students to go out and be leaders, to be leaders in the world of art, the world of science, the world of business, the world of politics. And there are many, alumni of the, of the Immaculate Heart College who went on to have very influential careers and who credit these extraordinary women um, for their leadership, for their empowerment. And I think that's what was so refreshing, because we're, Angela, you and I were sort of very used to a certain, uh, my mom has, her share of very scary, I might add. It was also terrified of the nuns that she went to, she studied under. But I think looking at it from the lens, one of the things that was really kind of mind blowing is looking from that lens of like the lack of opportunity that they were afforded, and if marriage, as Professor Briggs says, if like marriage and leading that kind of life was not appealing, was not in the cards, options were very limited. And it's really fascinating to see the many different reasons why they joined the orders.
I have a question for you, because I was struck by something that I wasn't expecting in watching the movie. Summer of Soul has gotten a lot of kudos, appropriately so, for this year's Sundance, for showing us the late 60s and giving us a snapshot into the late 60s. But I have to tell you, Rebel Hearts, you during that late 60s period with Corita's art and the footage you have, man, you just drop us right into into that period. And so my question is this, is that I could have seen the possibility this could have been a very standard issue talking head documentary, but you successfully do not have that. You, through your footage, through the editing, you give us a very vibrant film to tell this story. And I would love for you to talk about the efforts and the challenges in putting that together in that way, to make sure that we had something that took us for a colorful ride as opposed to just a lot of information.
Well, thank you. First of all, that means the world to hear that coming from you. That was always the goal, to make it, because they were vibrant, they were colorful and joyous. And for me, the way I like to tell stories is exactly to be as immersive as possible, to envelop you in the world, for us the viewer to go along on the ride with them, to feel and experience in a way almost like we're experiencing with them. This was made possible through many different ways, and through collaborating with extraordinary artists. First, I have to really call out our extraordinary visionary producer, Shawnee Isaac Smith, who 20 years ago began documenting these extraordinary women and amass a treasure trove of firsthand accounts, with a lot of them who are unfortunately no longer with us. People like Anita Caspary and Helen Kelly and Pat Reef, who unfortunately have since left us. But Shawnee was able to film their firsthand accounts and also begin to amass another treasure trove of archival. Now, the materials where we're talking about are sit-down interviews, and some footage of them as a community, and then we began to amass photographs. There's some film from their own archives, correspondence, and then there are other filmmakers like Bayless Glasscock, Tom Conrad, Haskell Wexler, and others who were filming at the Immaculate Heart College in the 60s. So when we discovered that was just like, ooh, other treasure trove. And you see that film, it is a Kodachrome dream. Literally, it is wonderful and, for lack of a better word, delicious. So lovely and wonderful. And so one of the things was amassing all these different different elements. And then for the spots that we didn't have anything really to tell the story, we want to be a little bit, think outside the box. We had our saying in the edit room. Whenever we were stuck, whenever anything, we would ask ourselves, what would Karita do? And she and the IHMs were always sort of guiding lights. And we thought, well, Karita would probably, bring this to life in a different way. And so I began to discuss with Judy Corin, who is one of our amazing producers and has a background with animation. And I was thinking of animation, and she's like, and an animation that feels tactile, that feels like it's born out of Karita's art. And Judy said, why don't you look at this extraordinary Icelandic animator, Una Lorentzen, who is based in Montreal. And then I looked at Una's work and literally jaw dropped. I was like, that's it. That's Rebel Hearts. That is, because there was this beautiful artisanal, tactile treatment in the way that she worked with animation. And when we connected, she was also so inspired by Karita's art. And we began to have this beautiful collaboration where in order to bring the story to life and to make it a cohesive element throughout, she began to animate sections of the story. And then everything kind of like took a cue from that. Our motion graphics team, which, we had 6 extraordinary motion graphics artists, also really kind of taking a cue from them and from a lot of what the Immaculate Hearts were doing at that time at the college. They had this extraordinary bulletin called the Irregular Bulletin that was graphically really inventive, and also outside the box with how they used typography and how they layered in images, and it was all really vibrant. And I think it just contributed to that, to that liveliness at that time, and something that we wanted to replicate on our end on how we approach the visual style of the film.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the film is watching these women after everything that they've gone through. It didn't turn them away from their faith. They formed their own secular group, and they're like, okay, we're going to do it our own way, off over here on the side. And I think the fact that they didn't lose faith and they realized that they could still carry on in their own manner is such an important lesson. I'm hoping that across the board, Catholic institutions share this in Catholic schools. And it's just beautiful because like love doesn't look like one thing. Success doesn't look like one thing, and neither does faith. Faith is something that's so personal. So I'm wondering if at all the Catholic community has reached out or seen this, and how these women are perceived by them today.
Absolutely. Well, I love that you said that. I really, very much resonates with how I feel as well, Angela. And thank you for saying that. It's very interesting because the film and the story has also been really embraced by the Catholics who I've heard from, who from Catholic sisters who have been inspired, I think, by the story of the Immaculate Heart. There are accounts that after the Immaculate Heart split from the institutional church and formed a community, that they heard from other communities that either apologize or for not standing up for them, or just in solidarity, saying that there were, when this was all happening, communities around the country and frankly around the world were also beginning to reform, because this was specifically an extremely well-educated group of extraordinary women. they were definitely, I think, leaders in that movement, but they were not the only ones. And so this was happening around the country, and I think for many communities, it was a bit alarming to see the fierce reaction from the Los Angeles Archdiocese and Cardinal McIntyre. And they, they had some support, but at the end of the day, it's really hard standing up to that side, the mastodon that it is, and so, but decades later, the church, in many sections of the church, because I think we see the institution as a monolith, but I think it's actually a lot more fragmented and has different pods than than sometimes we think about. But there are very, very sympathetic people within the Catholic Church and within the Catholic institution, actually, that are even we hear from the former secretary to Cardinal McIntyre, who expresses, in a certain level of regret for how they were treated, and they were treated extremely unfairly. And I think it's easier for many of them, even if they don't agree with everything that these sisters were doing, but it's easier for them to see that now. But in a way, I have to ask if this hadn't happened, one of the wonderful things that I think is that their imagination and their faith went beyond the structure, and they thought beyond structures. And that's also something that's very beautiful to me and sort of revolutionary. And I think in a way they sacrificed a lot, but I think it opened new worlds for people like me, who has felt, also not very welcomed by a certain institution, and see the possibility of a faith out, as you said, that faith is something very personal, and they followed their personal convictions, and they are still doing great work, and they're still out there. So there is a way, and I think in a way, their sacrifices and their struggles have not been in vain, because I think they have opened a new life for a lot of people, including myself.
Well, I think you really have given as to do a one film document on the history of what they went through, what they achieved, who these women were. It's remarkable, and you obviously you had subjects that deserve celebrating, and and certainly speak for themselves, and just emanate all kinds of charisma and wonderfulness. And this film really delivers. Pedro, congratulations on the film. Again, we've been talking about Rebel Hearts with the director Pedro Kos. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's been an honor being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. We loved it.
Thank you so much. Really means a lot. Thank you, guys.